Hello and welcome to One Take. I'm Dale Kirshner. Today I'm talking with Aaron Shilts, President and COO of NetSPI, the nation's leading provider of enterprise security testing and vulnerability management analysis. They often talk about this as penetration testing. They make sure that organizations are safe from people attacking them, and they partner with 7 of the top 10 US banks, 3 of the world's largest healthcare companies, 3 of the world's 5 largest healthcare companies, and the largest global cloud providers. NetSPI has been affected by COVID-19, just like the rest of us have this year, but it also continued to grow, not only organically, but earlier this month, it announced plans to acquire Silent Break Security, a Utah-based security testing firm. With this acquisition, NetSPI offers an even more robust services offering, including an offensive security and attack surface management. And Aaron, welcome to One Take.
Thanks for having me, Dale.
Boy, you've had a busy year. I mean, I just think about what I just talked about. You had to deal with COVID. You had to lead through that. You've been growing your business. You did an acquisition, and you're probably in one of the most hectic, most desired spots right now for all of us, and that's cybersecurity. How have you dealt with all this?
No, it's definitely been an interesting year, and when you kind of turn back the clock to earlier in 2020, there was a ton of unknowns. I remember kind of February, March timeframe. Many of us in Minnesota were on spring break, trying to find warmer climates, and the world changed very quickly. So, to answer the question of how we dealt with it, it's the approach has changed on an almost weekly basis from many unknowns to slowly learning more about how things were going to unfold. I mean, for us, first and foremost was the health and well-being of our employees. So we felt like, with that compass and true north, we went about finding new ways to serve our clients and to continue growing. And, we're very fortunate to be in cybersecurity as well, an industry that's, relatively untouched from the pandemic. So again, we're very fortunate to be there and felt like it was a great opportunity to double down on growth and really push.
So now, how did it affect your workforce? And did people have to work from home? We think of cybersecurity as being able to do that anyhow, but how did that affect your office?
Yeah, I mean, our sector of cybersecurity specifically, when you think about penetration testing, I mean, our job is to test the networks and applications and just different controls that our customers have. And that's almost always done from an external kind of perspective. So, our teams, while a lot of our work is remote and not on the customer prem, we were very able to very quickly adapt to remote workforce. We had a great technology stack in place leading up to this, but I mean, make no mistake about it. There was a couple sleepless nights early on determining if, our workforce could immediately overnight start working remotely. And there's a lot of things we had to firm up, whether that's our, policies and procedures, but obviously from a tech perspective, it's one thing to have the technology to do it. It's another to truly stress test it and make sure it holds up. And again, fortunately for us, it did, and we've had a great year.
Well, stretch testing is something I think that's been on the minds of every CEO who has had to do remote working at new levels they never anticipated. Meanwhile, I just keep thinking about all the vulnerabilities that may be out there with different companies that have gone to remote working. And I just think about SolarWinds. The Wall Street Journal had a story today indicating even further how many companies were affected by this. Now we hear Cisco we hear Linksys, Belcom, the modem manufacturers, Deloitte, and the military and, government, not to mention them, of course, but, such a breach with something that people trusted, something that was keeping an eye on their security. Is anything safe nowadays?
I mean, the easy answer is no. Given enough time and money, the reality is, there's always ways in. And again, that's, our focus is on giving our customers the assurance that they've done everything they can to close those holes and patch things up. I mean, the SolarWinds is a very severe, sophisticated, just highly targeted attack. It's a scary one, and it's a big one. And, unfortunately, I don't think we really still know all the downstream consequences of it. I mean, if you think of the number of clients that SolarWinds had, and they've said it's about 18,000, clients that had this particular software. They talk about 400 of the Fortune 500 having. I mean, it was ubiquitous in the enterprise. And so, it's one thing to patch up the software once they release their patches and fix the problems. It's a whole nother thing to figure out what damage has already occurred on your network and where threats are living in real time in your network. And I think that's what's, a lot of these companies are, really scrambling to figure out right now. So it's going to unfold over the next weeks and months.
Yeah, and you guys are kind of the cyber sleuths. I said penetration testing earlier, and in the old days, penetration testing was somebody would break through my firewall. They would get into my computer, and then, maybe an alarm would go off, and people would say, we've been broken into. Nowadays, you have to check for penetration issues internally, right? Because they can sneak in, embed different things all over the place, and then you have to figure out, okay, what might attack from within? So how do you stay on top of things like even what we're talking about now with SolarWinds and some of the things that may be brand new that are lurking out there that you're not aware of?
Yeah, I mean, and I think the other factor there is the traditional brick and mortar and data center is kind of disintegrated over the past, call it 5-6 years, where cloud computing and, we see many of our clients moving their workloads to other systems outside their brick and mortar. So, while it certainly used to be the case that once you're inside the network, you maybe had free reign. I mean, I think there's other controls they're putting in place, maybe around their people and identities, around their cloud infrastructures. I mean, you've really got to, you mentioned it as we were kicking off, just think about the entire attack surface, wherever your confidential or customer data or, health information or information about your customers may reside. You got to figure that out and find it. And, again, I think SolarWinds is a good example of that. I mean, once you're in this case, it was, for lack of a better word, sort of a Trojan horse piece of software that everyone trusted. From there, they jump off to other systems. So it's not just a matter of patching the first one, it's figuring out how they worked their way through the whole environment. So internal controls are really important.
Yeah, now it's whack-a-mole.
It is, pretty much.
Because so many people are working remotely now, and as you mentioned, so many people have migrated to the cloud, and I used to be paranoid to go to the cloud. I thought, oh no, that's just going to open me up to even more security risk. But now everybody's doing it. What would you say would be maybe the top 2 or 3 things that a company should do or look into if it hasn't already done so, to just make sure it's not so susceptible to being attacked?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is really nothing new for 2021, but I think the human element is almost always, the first thing to look at. I mean, the reality is, there's breaches that are highly sophisticated and targeted and, threat actors from foreign militaries and everything else. But the reality is sometimes you don't even need to go to all that work as a threat actor if you can just get someone to click on an email and open the email and click a link that they shouldn't. So, training your teams is incredibly important. Helping every single employee understand the ramifications is really important. I think in the coming year, there's going to be a renewed focus on third parties. So again, not to bring everything back to SolarWinds, but I think maybe the industry's gotten a little lax on, what software they implement or who they partner with. I mean, you think back to, it feels like ages ago, but the Target breach, to relate it to a local company, was a third-party breach of an HVAC vendor. So I think there's going to be a renewed focus on that. And then, the world of remote work is not changing anytime soon. None of us have a crystal ball, and no one will have the green light if there ever is one. But what we do know is that there's always this balance between kind of productivity and connectivity and security. They're inversely related, so the more open and the more productive, not necessarily productive, but I think the more connected people are and the more open and easy it is to work, it will always introduce security risks. So finding that balance. I mean, the reality is we have to do business and we have to continue to do business, but find ways to do it securely.
Yep, and the third party side is really interesting. And I suppose you do a lot of work on M&A then too. Like if I'm acquiring a company, and do I then need to look at all their third party relationships as well?
We do. We work with some private equity investors and other groups that will often do M&A just as a standard, do pen testing as a standard part of M&A diligence. Customers today feel like that, they definitely ascribe value and valuation to the security controls that customer or that their targets have put in place, and it's an important piece. I've never really seen negative results kill a deal, but it's certainly retraded valuations and had some tough conversations in the boardroom based on our findings.
Yep. And you call it penetration testing or pen testing. And a lot of us think, okay, somebody's sitting at a keyboard all day long. But there are some extreme lengths people sometimes go to actually check to see how secure things are. And, over the years, what have you seen as some of the more peculiar things that you've either found or that you've experienced when it comes to penetration testing?
Yeah, I mean, it's not all technical testing, right? So there's a lot of different things, and again, like we talked about, just needing one employee to click on an email. The same sort of goes for physical security. We do a lot of physical security testing, or social engineering, it's called at times. Some of the best stories in the industry come from there, and this is not during my time at NetSPI, but I ran a similar business unit in the past. And there was a lot of stories from the social engineering side. We had one where it was actually a Texas-based energy company, and we had a team of consultants down there doing social engineering tests just to understand, could they get inside the perimeter? Because the reality is, once you're in and you can kind of jack in, or maybe you get access to a data center, you pretty much have the crown jewels at that point. So in this particular test, we had a very enterprising consultant and team member who was crawling through suspended ceiling, trying to get access to the data center. So there was like not a cage that went all the way up through the false ceiling. And this person fell through and landed on a conference room table in the middle of the night. And, accidents happen. In this particular case, the individual decided to see how the customer would respond and maybe not let them know proactively. Turns out that was a mistake in hindsight, but to see how they responded to this sort of assumed breach scenario. And the police were alerted. A lot of things happened and a lot of processes were set in motion at the customer. And long story short, I had a very uncomfortable conversation with one of their executives the next day, which did lead to seeing the video. It actually all was captured on some of their internal surveillance videos. And so there's a lot of crazy stories in the industry. That was one of them. Luckily, nobody was hurt.
And you have about 165 employees today, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So, how do you manage them and how do you lead them? And now you're 2 locations. So how are you communicating and leading and still getting people to collaborate and share what they know with each other? Because we used to be able to do that more in person in offices, and now it's all remote. So how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, a few pieces. Fortunately, we were relatively spread out before. We've got a couple, primary brick and mortar locations, but we do have a workforce that's out serving the client and living in the regions where our clients exist. And so we've always really valued transparency and communication. We communicate early and often with, sometimes it's the fundamentals, like monthly all hands meetings where you just talk and listen and hear from employees. That's an important one. But, I think, we don't yet fully understand the long-term implications that it will have on innovation and collaboration, when people aren't on site and working together. And they're not necessarily out with their customers. We've actually seen a few customers that will, meet for dinner, or in the summer it was a little, it was nice. We could actually go out and play golf in some, climates. So we're seeing some customers more receptive to meeting with us, but again, personally, I feel like you don't innovate and collaborate the same way over Zoom as you do, popping by somebody's office and chatting with them. But we've done, I feel a very good job, not only with some of those meetings and transparent communication, but just technology. Whether it's video conferencing or online chat with tools like Slack, they're just critical to our business.
Kind of along that same theme, what are you planning for 2021, and what do you see as your greatest challenge in the year ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think much like early 2020, there are still unknowns for the coming year. So those continue to be a challenge. One challenge with having a really good growth year like we did this year is that we have to do it again next year, and the law of large numbers. and integrating a company that was acquired will be an important challenge for us to solve, but I'm confident we will. I think for us, we talk a lot about a performance-based culture. I mean, our team members all know their job. They know what they're accountable for. Nobody has to micromanage or watch everything they do. We trust them and we hire great people. And then, again, just with the true north of our clients and taking care of clients, a lot of the little things work themselves out. But again, we continue to have some aggressive plans for the coming year. I mean, if things go well, we'll do more than one acquisition in 2021. But the difficulty there, and we're very fortunate with what we found in Silent Break. You look at 50, 60, 70 targets before you find one that meets the the financial requirements and that maybe is the right time for them to do a transaction. But most importantly, and what we love about the Silent Break one is just the culture match. I mean, that's the piece that's hardest to find and the piece that will determine the success.
So on that note, what size company and what specialty niche are you looking for next?
Yeah, we made the decision a while ago to really stay purely focused on one segment of cybersecurity, and that's security testing. And we've been able to grow. We think there's a massive market need. We think there's some opportunities in EMEA and continuing, outside the U.S. to grow. We do some opportunistic work outside the U.S. right now, but we do think there's an opportunity there. But we plan to just stay absolutely focused on the area that we're focused on today.
And are you just in the United States, North America right now?
So a couple things. We do work globally for clients, but most of our team members are here, but we do have an operation in Pune, India as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually one of the things that I focused on over the last 3 years was building that team and, bringing them up. And it's been rough. I haven't been there for a year. I usually make several trips a year, but we've got a phenomenal team there. That's a big part of our success.
Cool. Aaron, we're just about out of time. What question should I have asked you that I didn't ask?
I don't know if it's as much a question or maybe, a quick thought is just, there's always upside, right? And so I think sometimes as you go through a pandemic like this, there's not a lot of focus on what good could come out of it. I mean, I think it's driven innovation in companies. I mean, simple examples like, you love to see some of the local retailers that have adapted and come up with innovative ways to continue maintaining their revenue growth, which is great. I think it's forced us to take a step back and do better planning and think about how scenarios like this could unfold. And I think there's going to be a lot more focus on planning in the future and managing these things. And finally, I think it can also be a reset for us with our families and spending time, at home, especially through the holidays, maybe a little bit of a forced reset. But I just think, I'm an eternal optimist, and I think there's always upside that sometimes we fail to walk through. So we try to stay focused on it.
That sounds good. And one last question I do have to ask, and that is, how much do you cost? Because as I'm thinking about all this, I'm thinking there are probably a lot of companies that are hearing us talk who are thinking, I maybe need to call these guys up. So tell us a little bit about how that works too. I know it's probably based on the individual issue, but.
Yeah. I mean, we actually try, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is having a very simple kind of scoping and pre-sales process. So, we work with clients all the way from kind of small and mid-market organizations up to, like you mentioned, some of the largest enterprises in the world. So, the entry costs actually aren't that high. I mean, we have many small customers that will come to us for projects, even under $10,000 to test a single application. In the scheme of things, the benefit of testing and, ensuring you understand any potential vulnerabilities in that software is really important. So wide range, but it's not, the barriers to entry aren't high.
Yep. Yeah. And we talked previously about the ROI. You have plenty of examples of where the return on investment is really worth it. So, it sounds good. Aaron, thank you very much for joining us today.
Dale, thank you. Have a great holiday.
Yeah, thank you. You too. And for those tuning in, If you would like to sponsor one or more of these one-take interviews or suggest someone else to be interviewed, let me know by emailing me directly at dalekirshner@gmail.com or calling me at 763-567-9241. For everyone who joined us today, thank you, and we'll see you next time on One Take.